Welcome into episode 6 of the Cinema Literature Podcast. Here's what happened in the movie TV world this week. Colin Trevorrow leaves Star Wars Episode 9 over creative differences. This news comes just after Episode 9 actually got a new writer in Jack Thorne, and it also comes after the poor reception of Colin Trevorrow's movie The Book of Henry, which came out over the summer. Now, filming for Episode 9 does not begin until January 2018, and as for new directors and Lucasfilm's search for a new director, Rian Johnson, who directed Episode 8, is a name that's getting a lot of attention right now because it seems like the most obvious choice and the smartest choice. I think Colin Trevorrow is talented, but when you look at when they announced the directors for Star Wars, the new trilogy, he was always kind of the odd man out. Everybody thought like he was the worst director, and they were kind of cautious about Episode 9 and finishing up Episode 9. And his writing the script was always a big question mark because he's not the strongest writer, and when he wrote this script, or he did another draft of the script for Jurassic World, it was not very strong. A lot of people thought the weakest part of that movie was the writing. Initially, it was reported that Rian Johnson was writing the first draft of Episode 9, but Rian Johnson actually stated he had nothing to do with Episode 9's script. But it is believed he did write a treatment, or at least a really detailed outline for Episode 9. People were talking about different directors taking over, like Matthew Vaughn or Jon Favreau, but they're definitely busy doing other stuff. I know Jon Favreau is doing the live-action Lion King movie. But I definitely hope it is Rian Johnson due to his movie Looper, which I think is a really good sci-fi movie. I know he directed a couple great episodes of Breaking Bad. And his talent is both a screenwriter and a director, and J.J. Abrams really praised him during the production of his both Episode 7 and Episode 8, and there have been no problems with the Episode 8 production at all. But finally, Lucasfilm, they need to get a better grasp on what type of director they want when they sign somebody. This is the fourth time Lucasfilm has removed a director from their respective film. Josh Trank's untitled anthology movie, which was rumored to be about Boba Fett, and it was supposed to come out around 2020, supposedly. He was kicked off. I'm not going to blame that on Lucasfilm because he was kicked off due to the production controversy when he directed that awful Fantastic Four movie that came out. But Gareth Edwards was removed as director during Rogue One reshoots, and Tony Gilroy, who directed Michael Clayton and Nightcrawler. No, Dan Gilroy directed Nightcrawler. Tony Gilroy, who directed Michael Clayton and The Bourne Legacy, he was put in charge of Rogue One and during reshoots. But Gareth Edwards was super accommodating. He was like, okay, fine, if that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. And that's why Gareth Edwards wasn't fired. He was still credited as the only director, and he'll probably be brought back into Lucasfilm to do something else because he still maintains a good relationship with him. Phil Lord and Chris Miller were fired from the Han Solo movie 4 months into filming due to creative differences. And even though Phil Lord and Christopher Miller might have done something different, I think it's one of those things where at that time, if you don't know the vision your directors are doing, then you did a bad job in pre-production meetings or something like that. And now you have Colin Trevorrow getting fired from Episode 9. So that's something they definitely need to fix, because if they keep firing directors, what up and coming director is going to want to work for you? Because they're like, man, I could probably get fired at any time, even if I'm 4 months into filming. So unless they want to just focus on getting veteran filmmakers who will not get hired unless they feel like their vision is going to happen, I mean, they can go that route, but that's paying a lot more money for directors, and you're probably not going to have them accommodate to your formula. Casey Affleck is teaming with Joe Wright and Blumhouse Productions for a movie called Stoner, based on a 1965 novel which revolves around a dirt poor Missouri boy whose life in the first half of the 20th century finds him embracing a scholar's life, marrying into a proper family, becoming estranged from his own family, finding new love, and encountering scandal. Joe Wright, who directed Atonement, Hannah, and Pride and Prejudice, and he also directed the upcoming film Darkest Hour, which is about Winston Churchill during World War II, is also getting rave reviews. He's kind of looking for a comeback, and I think Darkest Hour will probably be the start of that comeback movie. But his last movie, Pan, which was this awful Peter Pan adaptation where they're singing like Nirvana But this seems to be an Oscar bait type of movie, which isn't like unheard of for Blumhouse. Blumhouse mainly focuses on the micro budget horror movies, but they've been producers for some Oscar films like The Reader and Whiplash, which was my favorite movie of 2014. Joe Wright, I think this will be a great movie, one, because Casey Affleck is a really good actor, and I think now after Manchester by the Sea, he's getting a lot of projects that he really wants to do. I think he has his pick of the litter. And with Joe Wright and the acclaim that Darkest Hour is getting from the Telluride Film Festival, this will only make this next movie, Stoner, even more of a high-profile award season type of film. First, Hostel's trailer reveals Christian Bale's new Western. Set in 1892, Hostels tells the story of a legendary army captain who, after stern resistance, reluctantly agrees to escort a dying Cheyenne war chief and his family back home to tribal lands. Making the harrowing and perilous journey from New Mexico to the grasslands of Montana, the former rivals encounter a young widow, whose family was murdered on the plains. Together they must join forces to overcome the punishing landscape, hostile Comanche, and vicious outliers they encounter along the way. The trailer, it looks fantastic. I mean, it actually looks like a real, like, down and dirty Western, and the aesthetic reminds me of the remake of 3:10 to Yuma, which also stars Christian Bale, actually, that came out like 10 years ago. It's a great cast: Christian Bale, Rosamund Pike, Adam Beach, Ben Foster, and Jesse Plemons. My only kind of reservation is that it's directed by Scott Cooper. And Scott Cooper, he's directed good movies. He directed Crazy Heart, Out of the Furnace, and Black Mass. And he has a reputation as an actor's director. And Christian Bale loves working with him because when Out of the Furnace came out, although Out of the Furnace got a mixed reception, Christian Bale did nothing but praise Scott Cooper coming out of that. And the only Scott Cooper movie I've seen in full was Black Mass. And I'm a little bit ambivalent about that movie because he does get a great performance out of both Johnny Depp and Joel Edgerton. But the execution of that story is kind of average. And the movie just seems to copy the Martin Scorsese model of gangster movies. Like, literally, it's like a Martin Scorsese wannabe. So, I just think with Scott Cooper's movies, while he does make good movies, I feel there's kind of this underperformance in a way of those movies could be great considering the cast that's involved, writers that are involved, and while the actors do a great job, the execution of the overall plot just isn't very good. I mean, it's good, it's just not great. I feel like he's had great source material, or he's had great scripts, and they haven't been great movies, you know. Shia LaBeouf will not return as Mutt for Indiana Jones 5. This is completely understandable since just about everybody wants to forget Kingdom of the Crystal Skull and the fact that Shia LaBeouf is mentally unstable. But I remember when that movie came out, I mean, he got cast in that movie because he was a hot name after the summer of 2007. He was in Surf's Up, Disturbia, and then he was in the first Transformers movie. And Spielberg, who was an executive producer on Transformers, kind of took him under his wing and mentored him a little bit. But I also kind of wonder, would it be different? Would Shia LaBeouf have been in this movie if he didn't criticize Crystal Skull shortly after that movie came out? And then Spielberg said that LaBeouf should keep his mouth shut and don't bite the hand that feeds you. I actually liked Shia LaBeouf in Crystal Skull. I think LaBeouf is an actor who's capable of greatness. I mean, some of his performances in Fury, in Lawless, and American Honey, where he is simply the best actor on screen no matter what. Because in Lawless, you know, you got a movie with Tom Hardy and Jessica Chastain, and he's arguably the best actor in that. Fury, a movie with, you know, guys like Logan Lerman, John Bernthal, and Brad Pitt, and he's the best actor on screen. I totally get him not being in this movie. I mean, I remember seeing Crystal Skull. I like Crystal Skull. I was also 12 when I saw it. So, you know, there's that. I mean, the only Indiana Jones movies I've seen are Raiders and Crystal Skull. I know I should probably see the other two, but in regards to Shia LaBeouf, he seems to still be doing pretty good work. He's probably not getting paid as much as he once was, but I know he's got a movie coming out later this year, Borg McEnroe, where he's playing John McEnroe, and that trailer looks pretty intense, and I think he's probably one of the perfect people to play John McEnroe. So he's still in good projects. I don't think he's going to be mad about not coming back for Indiana Jones 5, especially because that movie doesn't come out till probably 2020. Gavin O'Connor is in talks to write and direct Suicide Squad 2. I do really like this choice because of Warrior and Miracle. Both of them are sports movies. I think Miracle is a super cliched movie, but it's still really enjoyable. And Warrior is also cliched, but it seems to rise above those cliches to be a deeper, more emotional and meaningful movie. I was kind of mixed on his last movie, The Accountant, which came out a couple years ago. No, came out last October. However, it's not really, if Warner Brothers does not give him the proper amount of time to develop this movie, it's not going to matter how good the choice is. I think David Ayer was a really good director. He directed Fury, he directed End of Watch, and he was only given 6 weeks to write the script for the first Suicide Squad movie. So if they only give Gavin O'Connor 6 weeks for this movie, then it's not going to be very good. He'll probably have more time because they're probably not going to film Suicide Squad 2 until next fall because Will Smith has, his schedule is slammed. I know they just started production on the Aladdin live-action movie where he's playing the genie. But at the end of the day, the Suicide Squad movie should be like a Magnificent Seven bounty hunter type of movie. You have bad guys going after worse guys, and you focus on those bad guys. And the first one should have been about the Suicide Squad hunting down the Joker, which David Ayer actually came out and said. If it was just them hunting down the Joker, I feel like that would have been a much better movie than them going after some witch, goddess, whatever, and turning into this $200 million movie with a sky beam at the end, and it just became super generic like every other movie. So, it has to be two things. It has to be give them enough time to develop the movie, and also make a story that doesn't have to be, that isn't like every other superhero movie with this huge bloated third act. Make it grounded and make it somewhat realistic. Because if they would have done that with the first movie, I feel like that would have been a lot better movie. Apple and Amazon have emerged as contenders for the distribution rights to James Bond. MGM and Eon will still produce the James Bond films and take the lion's share of profits, but Amazon and Apple could be looking for something a little bigger. Apple has set aside $1 billion for production of original TV series and movies. Both companies are reported to be looking to add companion television shows and maybe build out a cinematic universe as well. I don't understand how they could do that necessarily unless, those production companies agree with them to do that with the distribution company. Because if they made TV shows and cinematic universes in the James Bond world, that's probably where they can make real money. But because of that, Apple and Amazon probably will not get the rights because Eon's producers, Barbara Broccoli and Michael Wilson, still have a very traditional view of the studio system and how to make movies, and Warner Brothers is reportedly the leading candidate in all of this. As for Apple and Amazon, they will eventually get rights to some huge property. It just won't be James Bond because the way those executives handle those rights are still steeped in classic Hollywood, and I don't think they would give it to a streaming service. Well, it turns out Disney will pull Marvel and Star Wars movies from Netflix to put on their own streaming service. Their own streaming service will premiere in 2019, and this might be one of the worst case scenarios for Netflix. It's a great move by Disney because this attracts somewhat older audiences to their streaming service instead of just having kid-centric programming with Walt Disney Studios movies and Pixar movies. I'm just curious, what is Netflix going to do to combat losing most of their high-profile movie program? Because as for their movies that appeal to wide audiences, Marvel and Star Wars movies make up probably over 90% of those huge wide appeal films, that content. Netflix has great shows, but most of the films that I would watch on Netflix would be those Marvel, Disney, or Lucasfilm movies because I'm really not that interested in the Marvel TV shows anymore. They have a couple other good shows, but nothing I watch religiously. And there are some people that say that Disney taking these movies from Netflix is unfair because there will be too many streaming services, which altogether would cost more than cable. And first off, Disney doesn't give a flying you-know-what about how you feel about this. Because they will do whatever makes them money, and starting a streaming service will make them more money than just licensing their content to Netflix. And as for paying for all the streaming services, don't. Over time, the best streaming services will rise to the top because of intense competition. And with Apple and Disney entering the streaming game, there will be some services that will be left out. I mean, in the future, I could see myself paying for Apple, Disney, Amazon, HBO, and then whenever ESPN releases their streaming service, which I think is next year, I'll pay for that too. I just don't see myself in the future paying for services such as CBS All Access or Hulu or Netflix. I just don't, unless Netflix, and unless those can produce tons of content that I really want to see. No, I mean, this is capitalism at its finest, and people are getting all pissy because it's like, well, I'm going to end up paying more than cable. You don't have to. You don't have to pay for 7 streaming services. That's your choice. So, it's a great move by Disney. Netflix might be a little lost as for what to do right now, but, you know, that's why they're buying all this original content. That's why they're producing a bunch of content now. It'll be interesting to see how they react. Drew Goddard signs on to write and direct XForce. XForce focuses on a Black Ops force of down and dirty mutant warriors led by Deadpool and Cable. Drew Goddard, he's always had a reputation as a great screenwriter in general, and he wrote for Buffy, Angel, and Alias. He also wrote the Cloverfield script, and he wrote a draft of World War Z. He wrote the script for The Martian, for which he was nominated for an Academy Award. He was originally going to direct that movie, but he had trouble getting funding, and then Ridley Scott came on, and the movie was given the green light. He co-wrote and directed Cabin in the Woods, which helped turn the horror genre on its head by pointing out these cliches and story tropes. But essentially, it deconstructed the horror genre, and he was still able to make an interesting story out of it. And he also helped launch Marvel's Daredevil on Netflix. He wrote the first 2 episodes of the first season, which is probably the best season of any of the Marvel shows in general. But I'm surprised Drew Goddard's name didn't come up earlier. The original director that wrote a draft of X-Force and signed on to direct was this guy Jeff Wadlow, who directed Kick-Ass 2, which was terrible. But the guy has rarely missed in his career. He has a career full of hits, and he's yet to get kind of a bigger budget movie under his belt. But I think Fox definitely hit a home run here by signing on Drew Goddard. It's interesting with Fox's X-Men universe because the main X-Men universe has taken a backseat to Deadpool. I mean, if you look at X-Men Days of Future Past, Days of Future Past made about $747 million on a $225 million budget. So it made money, it just didn't make that much money. But if you look at Deadpool, it made $782 million on a $58 million budget. So you could see where Fox's loyalties lie, essentially. And they want to keep making these rated R movies. And X-Force will probably be the first official big budget rated R X-Men movie because it'll probably be a $120 million movie. It'll definitely be in excess of $100 million. But with Drew Goddard signing on, I'm definitely looking forward to X-Force now. I think it's going to be really good. It probably won't come out till 2019 or 2020, but it's going to be one to look forward to. The next Purge film, the 4th in the series, will take place during the first ever Purge, which will be an experimental test on Staten Island. James DeMonaco will return to write and direct the film just like he did on the first 3 movies. While I think The Purge is a really great concept for a movie, I just don't think the movies are executed very well. And it's probably because that same guy, James DeMonaco, keeps coming back and they don't get any other new blood in there. I've only seen the second one, and I liked Frank Grillo, the main character in the second one. I liked him in the movie because it's probably the best Punisher movie to date. Definitely the best Punisher movie to date. But the rest of the movie is just not interesting at all. Because you know what it is, and stretching it out over an hour and a half, unless you really care about the characters, which you don't, because it's like, okay, I want them to survive, but you just don't get that attached. And supposedly they want to do a TV show about the Purge. I think that would just crash and burn directly. But, I mean, I know it definitely has a fan base. The series has made over $300 million combined, I think on a combined $23 million budget. So, it's again those micro-budget horror movies that Blumhouse does. So, they're going to keep making them unless they don't make money, because they provide a great return on investment. The It sequel is moving forward for a likely 2019 release date. 2 movies was always the plan for It, dating back to 2009 when Cary Fukunaga adapted the novel into 2 movies originally. And then he left the project and Andy Muschietti came on. And he's actually not signed on to direct the sequel yet, but it seems inevitable he will. You know, Warner Brothers just have to sign him back. But Warner Brothers might have to back up the money truck because it is going to make a lot of money. It's already made $13.5 million in just Thursday night screenings as of this recording on a Friday. and it's only a $35 million budget. And supposedly it's tracking to make $50 million domestically opening weekend. And I think worldwide, when it's all said and done, the movie's probably going to make over $300 million because it's getting really great reviews. I think people, once they see it, word of mouth is going to spread. They're going to want to see it again and again. Another good question is, will they bring back the kids from this first movie? Because I'm aware, I haven't read the book, but I'm aware the book has flashbacks when the kids are adults. They have flashbacks to their childhood. Also, the kid actors, they're not signed on for the sequel as well. So if they get signed back, who knows? They could probably demand a little more money, and I wouldn't be surprised if the sequel has a budget of anywhere between $50 and $70 million, mainly just because of director salary and actor salaries, and compared to the $35 million budget of the first one. But I think even then, even though that might have a higher budget, it's probably still going to make money, because by the time that second movie comes out, seeing how good this one is, it's still going to make a ton of money, and it's going to make a big profit for Warner Brothers. Before I go, here are a couple movie recommendations for the weekend. These are my favorite movies of 2012 and 2013, both directed by David O. Russell. The first one is Silver Linings Playbook, starring Bradley Cooper, Jennifer Lawrence, Robert De Niro, and Jackie Weaver. Bradley Cooper plays Patrick Pat Solitano Jr., a man with bipolar disorder who is released from a psychiatric hospital and moves back in with his parents. Determined to win back his estranged wife, Pat meets recently widowed Tiffany Maxwell, who offers to help him get his wife back if he enters a dance competition with her. The two become closer as they train, and Pat, his father, and Tiffany examine their relationships with each other as they cope with their problems. I remember seeing this movie back in 2012. We actually saw it a couple weeks after it came out. I immediately fell in love with it. It's a movie about the neighborhood and the community and kind of the positive and negative effects of that, because when the main character, Pat, goes back to his hometown and he kind of runs into people who know of his bipolar episode that happened, he notices that people see him differently. He notices that some people are kind of very avoiding of him, and then some people are actually just ready to welcome him back. And it's just interesting to kind of see how people's attitudes change once they kind of hear something about you. But it's also about, hitting rock bottom and being able to successfully reevaluate yourself. And that's something that Pat struggles with at the beginning, but ultimately he's able to accurately reevaluate his life. And, you can still have those great moments in your life, and you can find love and happiness even when you're hitting the restart button and you're starting over. And one of the sadder parts, maybe it's not sad, but it's very real, is that he wants his quote-unquote normal life back, but he starts to realize that nothing about life is really normal, and you do really kind of have to roll with the punches. But the movie kind of proved to me that Bradley Cooper is a very, very good actor. I mean, the first movie I ever saw him in was Wedding Crashers, and of course I didn't like him because he plays a dick in Wedding Crashers, but then I saw him in Hangover, thought he was great in Hangover. I saw him in Limitless, he was great in Limitless, and then I feel like Silver Linings Playbook was like this culmination of that dude can really act. And it was also when my crush officially started for Jennifer Lawrence. Earlier that year, Hunger Games came out. I'm like, oh, who is that actress? And then I saw her again in Silver Linings Playbook. I'm like, yeah, she's pretty great. The second movie is American Hustle, which came out in 2013, starring Christian Bale, Amy Adams, Bradley Cooper, Jeremy Renner, and Jennifer Lawrence. Set in 1978, it stars Christian Bale and Amy Adams as two con artists who are forced by an FBI agent to set up an elaborate sting operation on corrupt politicians, including the mayor of Camden, New Jersey. Jennifer Lawrence plays the unpredictable wife of Bale's character. Yeah, you basically hate Jennifer Lawrence in this movie, which is good because you're kind of supposed to, but she plays one of the worst people just ever. Just the most passive-aggressive, annoying women I think ever put on film. But the movie as a whole, it's super fun, it's really funny, it's really smart, it's got fantastic, fully realized characters. I think Christian Bale is great as this New York, New Jersey, overweight, balding, yet like this smooth-talking con artist who thinks that he is the cat's pajamas. I mean, he thinks he is great. And I think it's a nice case study on the peaks and pitfalls of ambition, especially for the main characters. But, fly too high, get burned by the sun, the whole Icarus thing. But great soundtrack, favorite movie of 2013, and one of my favorite lines is throughout the movie, the characters will say when they're operating this sting, they talk about doing things from the feet up, because if you can do stuff from the feet up, you can fool just about anyone. And there's a scene where Christian Bale, who plays a con artist, shows Bradley Cooper, who's the FBI agent. They go to this museum of art, and Christian Bale shows him this painting. And he goes, hey, you like this painting? He's like, yeah, it's amazing. And he goes, well, it's a fake. And he's like, no, it can't be a fake. He's like, no, it is a fake. But you think it's amazing because the artist was so good that you think it's real. So then he says, who's more talented, the artist or the forger? Well, that's it. If you want to get in touch with Cinema Literature and ask us questions about some of your favorite movies, upcoming films, or what goes into making a movie, feel free to comment on our YouTube channel or on our website, cinemalit.weebly.com. You can also email us at cinemalit52814@gmail.com. If you want to keep up with the podcast, rate, review, and subscribe to Cinema Literature on iTunes. Like us on YouTube and follow us on Twitter, simply @CinemaLit. Peace.